Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're going to be doing another episode of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights, where we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people will be making and talk about the wonderful biodiversity that surrounds us and all that malarkey. And we've got a very interesting list today. We've got a couple like remasters, a couple interesting new species, which I'm really excited to go through. So a really good mix, I think, which is always good. A couple birds, a couple mammals, all of that, even a fish, which we'll get into. So we're going to be starting off today. This is an older one, but really awesome. Just updated 1.9 by Leaf and Buffzoo. We have the African Tigerfish. Let's have a look at these wonderful guys here. So these guys, also known as the Taveras or the Nguelsh. These guys are a predatory freshwater fish that is found across a lot of Africa. And these guys are actually generally considered piscivorous, which means they eat other fish. But they've been observed eating barn swallows by jumping out of them and catching them while they're flying. So really wonderful animal here that we get a look at here. So as you can see, these guys are kind of overall like quite silvery with thin black stripes running down their body, as you can see there. They also have a red caudal fin and that's forked, and they have a large head with these really large teeth that kind of give the name tigerfish. They've got the stripes like a tiger, and they've got the big, mean teeth, as you can kind of see going on here. Really gnarly looking. And they're able to replace their teeth simultaneously on the upper and lower jaws, so that's what's really cool. And males are typically a little bit larger and more full-bodied than the females. And they can grow up to about 105 centimeters or 41 inches in snout length. 105 centimeters, 41 inches snout to vent length, which is typically how they're measured. So quite a big fish, a bit over a meter or so. These guys typically live in all sorts of rivers. So they live in Senegal River, the Nile River, the Congo, Zambezi River, Limpopo River. A lot of these rivers, as well as like Lake Balawengo, Upega, Ruwaka, and Okavango Basin as well. So a lot of these really high-profile freshwater habitats you'll typically find these guys in. And in terms of the ecological significance, they're a very important food source for locals and income as well. And they actually promote tourism because a lot of sports fishers want to hunt these guys, and even recreational fishing as well. And they've also been extensively studied by conservation groups and university researchers because they're just such an interesting fish. And in terms of their habitat and ecology, they mainly live near the bottom of large freshwater lakes and rivers. And during the day, they tend to be found closer to the surface, and then they move towards the bottom at night, which is actually quite opposite to a lot of fish. But they thrive in highly oxygenated water and warm climates, so that's where you're most likely to find them. And in terms of the population and conservation status, they're one of the most common. They're very common and widespread across most of its range. That there are some populations with some fluctuations and stuff, but luckily they are considered least concern, so they're able to be harvested quite sustainably, especially by local populations. And they've actually declined in some rivers in southern Africa as a result of water abrasion and things like that. Also, unregulated gill nets in southern Africa and even East Africa. There's been overfishing and stuff, and even agricultural activities such as deforestation and pesticides have hurt the populations locally. But they're on least concern because they are have a wide distribution and are still protected, so they are still considered doing pretty well. But there are some issues that do face populations across Africa. So in terms of behavior, they can be found roaming waters in schools containing similar-sized fish, and the large ones tend to live and hunt alone. And the breeding habits are somewhat elusive, but it's thought that the breeding may take place over a couple of days between December and January. The timing depends on when the river and streams begin to swell due to the start of the raining season, where the female will lay their eggs in submerged vegetation and shallow water close to the shore, and these hatchlings will stay in the safety of these vegetation until the water levels become low enough to force them further into the water. And they actually migrate up to 100 kilometers upstream to find these wonderful habitats. Let's see if we can find another one that's swimming around here. Let's look at a baby. Look at this wonderful little guy here. So these guys are mostly piscivorous, and they're quite fierce hunters, so they feed whatever fish they'll eat, especially smaller fish. So they'll eat things like cichlids, gobies, and carp, and catfish. And insects and zooplankton might be part of their diets, especially during their juvenile stage. And it's actually been a population that's been observed eating barn swallows, so they will get them on the wing. So this behavior was speculated previously, but it's the first time to be documented. So what it seems to happen is that they pursue the bird from the surface rather than below the water. So what they do is the depth of the pursuit will affect the fish perception because of light refraction in the water. So it kind of tries to judge it by its reflection, and then kind of jumps up and grabs it. And it's actually successful about 25% of the time. So that's very interesting. And they are also considered, even though they're fierce, they're often considered a pet, though they generally shouldn't be kept as a pet because they're large and they have a lot of advanced skills that you need to be pretty experienced freshwater keeper to keep these guys. These fish can also get very large and require at least a 2,400 litre tank, and they do not get along with any fish smaller than themselves. Since smaller fish makes up part of their diet, so they have to be kept by themselves. And as they grow larger, these fish can become very difficult to handle because of their aggressive nature and sharp teeth. So, a lot of places they're banned, such as Texas, Utah, and Florida. So you got to be very, very careful with these guys. But yeah, really, really wonderful. So, winning another nice fish. I'm really excited to cover these guys because I've been wanting to cover them for a while. But yeah, really, really beautiful fish. Came out beautifully. So we're going to be moving on next. We have got the Siberian crane done by Bongo Hardwood. We all love Bongo Hardwood and all the wonderful mods he's been making. We've got the Siberian crane here, also known as the snow crane or the Siberian white crane. These guys are obviously a species of crane, and they're quite distinctive among other species of crane because these guys are almost completely white, except for the black primary feathers that are visible in flight, and the kind of black head it's got. And there are two populations, kind of one in the Arctic tundra of western eastern Russia, and the eastern population migrates to China during the winter, and the western population will kind of basically come to winters in Iran or India, so kind of those areas. And among the cranes, they also make very long-distance migrations, and their populations, particularly those in their western range, have really declined a lot due to hunting along their migration routes and habitat degradation. And the world population was estimated in 2010 to be about 3,200 birds, mostly belonging to the eastern population, with about 95% of them wintering in the Punyan Lake Basin in China, which is habitat that's been altered by the Three Gorges Dam. So really, really cool animal here. So adults of both sexes, as you can see here, are pretty much purely white, except for the black primaries, alula, and the coverts. Those are the feathers on the wing. You can see the irises are quite yellow, as you can see here. Really, really beautiful birds. And during the breeding season, both the females and the males will often be seen with mud streaking their feathers as they dip their beaks in the mud and smear it on their feathers, potentially to help with camouflage. And they can get quite large. They're quite large species of crane. They typically weigh between 4.9 and 8.6 kilograms, or 11 to 19 pounds, and stand up to about 140 centimeters, or 4 foot 7 inches tall. So are quite large. And their wingspan is also reported between 210 to 260 centimeters, or 6 foot 11 to 8 foot 6. And their length is about 115 to 127 centimeters, or 45 to 50 inches, with males on average being larger than females. And there actually is one single oversized male who's weighed about 15 kilograms, but that's kind of hard to tell. But really, really interesting bird. As I mentioned, they kind of the breeding area of these cranes extended past the Ural Mountains and the parts of Russia as well. They used to breed pretty much all across Russia. I mean, not breed, they used to live across Russia. And the breeding areas of modern times have been restricted to two regions. The western area is the river basins of the Ob, Konda and Severe region kind of there to the east, and the other population, which is the larger one, brings in Yakuta between the Yana and Idzena rivers. And like most cranes, these guys typically like to live in shallow marshlands and wetlands, but will often forage in deeper waters than other cranes. So that's kind of a little thing they do differently. They actually also show very high site fidelity, so they often return to the same places pretty much all the time. And the eastern population, as I mentioned, usually winters in the Punyan Lake, and the western population winters in Iran, with some wintering in India formerly, but kind of as the population's declined, they're not really doing that anymore. And as I mentioned, these guys are widely dispersed in their breeding areas, and they tend to be quite territorial. They maintain these feeding territories in winter, and they may form small or loose flocks or gather close to winter roosts. And they're also very diurnal, so they feed almost completely throughout the day, but they'll feed on submerged vegetation. They often dip their heads underwater, and when calling, birds will stretch their neck forwards. And they often have many different calls that they use to identify each other that vary between individual variation, colors, things like that. Very, very interesting. And also very interesting, the captivity. There was one that was recorded for living nearly 62 years and another one that lived for 83 years. So they're obviously very, very long-lived birds. And these cranes, these guys mainly feed on plants, although they are omnivorous. So in the summer grounds, they typically will feed on the roots of herbivore and seeds, things like that. And they also eat things like small rodents, such as lemming and voles, earthworms and fish. And it was earlier thought they predominantly ate fish, but they typically... later studies show that they actually take animal prey mainly when the vegetation is covered in snow. So it's a very interesting thing. They also swallow pebbles to aid digestion, and which is often in their crops that allows them to digest food, similar to like you hear like plesiosaurs and sauropods doing it. That kind of style. And specimens in India had been found to mainly have aquatic plants in their stomachs, and they often notice they pick up beetles and bird eggs in captivity, so they will eat those. So in terms of breeding, they will return to the Arctic tundra around the end of April to beginning of May, where the nest is usually on the edge of a lake or something like that. And most eggs are laid in the first week of June when the tundra is snow-free. They usually lay about 2 eggs, and they have... these wonderful little guys here. Let's see if we can get to the baby. There we are. So, the male will typically stand guard nearby while the female lays her eggs, and the eggs will hatch after about 27 to 29 days, and the young will fledge after about 80 days of hatching, and usually only the single chick survives due to aggression between the young birds, and the population increase per year is less than 10%, which is the lowest recruitment rate in any cranes, which obviously makes them very susceptible to population declines. And the success in breeding may further be hampered by the distributor of reindeer and sometimes dog that accompany the reindeer herders, so that can be something that really hurts the populations. And captive breeding has been achieved, and there have been some... after numerous failed attempts, they managed to get it. And males are often killed their mates in captive breeding situations. So artificial insemination and the hatching of eggs by other crane species such as sandhills, and using those to also using floodlights to simulate the longer day lengths of the Arctic summers help them in their captive populations, which is very interesting. And in terms of migration, as I mentioned, they kind of have 2 distinct populations. There's one in the western population in western Siberia, and the other population kind of and the other side, the eastern part, so there's 2 very distinct populations. And the eastern population winters along the Yangtze River, and the western population is found in Iran, which kind of, and some populations are extinct, things like that. But yeah, the status of the crane is believed to be no more than about 4,000, so they're considered critically endangered actually, with nearly all of them breeding in the east. And of the 15 crane species, this is actually one of the most threatened, with only like the whooping crane, which I've mentioned before, being rarer. And the western population has dwindled to 4 in 2002, and it may be all but 1 individual left, which is estimated to be a 98% population loss. So that's as well, especially on the wintering sides in Pyongyang, China. So that's very sad. The historical records show that they had a much wider distribution that include Gujarat and New Delhi, which is very, very sad. And in 1974, there was 75 birds that wintered in Barapur, I believe you say that, but they declined to a single pair in 1992, and the last bird was spotted in 2002, and then they haven't been to India since, sadly. But satellite technology used to track these migration is found that they wintered in Iran. So luckily there have been some populations found, and hopefully that there's some really good conservation efforts to really help the species, because they really deserve it. I think they're really beautiful, and I hope we get some more hope for the western population. Really, really beautiful birds. I'm a big fan of these cranes, and cool that we get to highlight such a cool endangered species. So next, this was also done by Bongo Hardwood. Next, we've got one done by Narwhal. We have got the largest flying bird today. We've got the Trumpeter Swan. So I know you look a little bit awkward out of the water, but it's just how rigs are rigs, but really, really wonderful. So the trumpeter swan is a species of swan that is found only in North America, and the heaviest living bird native to North America, and the largest extant species of waterfowl. And they can get quite huge. They can get up to about 138 to 165 centimeters, or 4 foot 6 to 5 foot 5 long. The large males can get up to 5 foot 11, or 180 centimeters in total length. And the weight of adult birds is typically between 7 and 13.6 kilograms, or 15 to 30 pounds. And possibly due to the seasonal variation, they can potentially get up to, on average, males weigh about 10 to 12 kilograms, or 24 to 28 pounds, and females get between 9 and 10 kilograms, or 21 to 23 pounds. And they are the largest bird capable of flight in terms of average mass, though there are kind of birds that kind of match it. So that's the mute swan, the Dalmatian pelican, the koi buzzard, and the Andean condor. All exceed kind of like 10 kilograms, so they're all very large birds. But they're considered one of the largest species of waterfowl, on average at least, and the largest one in North America. So they also have a very large wingspan of about 185 to 250 centimeters, or 6 foot 1 to 8 foot 2, which is very interesting. And they have their plumage, as you can see, is almost entirely white. And like mute swan, these guys have a light grey plumage and pinkish legs. But as the whooper swan, these guys have that typically upright posture as well, which is really, really cool. And they also have a beak length of about 10 to 12 centimeters, or 4.1 to 4.7 inches, which is up to twice the length of the bill of a Canada goose, and is one of the largest of any waterfowl, which is pretty cool. And as I mentioned, these guys, they were endangered at some point. The population from 1968 to 2010 has actually increased from 3,722 and up to approximately 46,225 birds, which in large part due to reintroductions by people. And they typically like to breed in these large shallow ponds, lakes, pristine wetlands, and places like that, especially in the northwestern and central parts of North America, with the largest number being found in Alaska. And they prefer nesting sites with enough space to have enough surface water for them to take off, as well as access to food, shallow water that's unpolluted with little to no human disturbance. And natural populations of these swans migrate to and from the Pacific coast and portions of the United States, flying in V-shaped flocks, and released populations are mostly non-migratory. See if you can find one in the water. Oh, they're not going to get in the water yet. Let's have a look at you. You'll probably get in the water. And during the winter, they migrate to the southern tier of Canada and the eastern parts of the United States. So they can be found in Montana, Washington State as well, Colorado, and they've been found as far south as Texas and Southern California. And non-migratory trumpeter swans have been artificially introduced in some areas such as Oregon, where they never originally occurred, because of their natural beauty and the suitable waterfowl attract wildlife enthusiasts and all that, and it's potentially actually helped their population. So in terms of diet, these guys feed while swimming, sometimes ending up and upending and dabbing to reach submerged food, where they typically eat mostly aquatic plants. They'll eat both leaves and stems of submerged and vegetation, things like that. And they'll also dig up muddy substrate to extract roots and tubers. And in winter, they may actually eat grass and grains in the fields as well. And they often feed at night as well as the day, with feeding activity and the birds' weights often peak during the spring as they prepare for the breeding season. The young will also initially eat insects, small fish, fish eggs, and crustaceans as part of their diet to give them additional protein until they feed on this more vegetarian diet when they are kind of a few months old. And like most other swans, they mate for life, and both parents participate in raising their young. And primarily the female incubates the eggs, with most pair bonds forming when the swans are 5 to 7 years old, though some pairs do not form until they are nearly 20 years old. And divorces have been known between birds. In the case, the male will be serially monogamous with males in different breeding seasons. Occasionally, if a mate dies, a male trumpeter swan may not pair again for the rest of his life, which is kind of sweet, but it's just sad that his mate died. Most egg laying occurs in late April to May, and the females lay 3 to 12 eggs, with 4 to 6 being on average. on a small mound of plant material on a small island, or a beaver or muskrat lodge, or a floating platform. They're typically like that. And the same location may actually be used for several years, and both members of the pair help build this nest. And this nest is typically a large open bowl of grasses and sedges and other aquatic vegetation, things like that, that can be ranging in diameter from 1.2 to 3.6 meters, or 3 to 11 feet wide, so that's enormous. And the eggs also are kind of quite possibly the largest of any flying bird alive, and in comparison are 20% larger of the dimensions of the Andean condor, being about 73 millimeters wide, or 2.9 inches wide, 113 millimeters long, or 4.5 inches long, and they weigh about 320 grams, or 11.3 ounces, so quite big. And the incubation period for these guys is typically, we'll have a look at the baby while we let's have a look at you while you're swimming around. The incubation period is typically between 32 and 37 days, which is handled mostly by the female, but occasionally the male as well. The young are able to swim basically 2 days after being hatching, and they're usually capable of feeding themselves at most after 2 weeks. So really, really wonderful birds here, I do say so myself. The flinching stage typically here ranges about 3 to 4 months with nesting swans. They are territorial and harass other animals, but once they reach that 3 to 4 month stage, the babies fledge and can go off and do their own thing. And in terms of mortality, in captivity, members of the species can survive to 33 years old, in the wild to at least 24. Young trumpeter swans may have a little of 40% chance of surviving due to the various different disturbances by humans, predation, nest flooding, starvation, things like that. And mortality in adults is quite low though, and the survival rate is usually between 80 to 100% annually, unless they are hunted by people. So it's kind of the kill them while they're young kind of thing. They almost kind of make so many eggs to kind of flood the environment because they won't really survive. Predators of these guys include ravens, raccoons, wolverines, black and grizzly bears, coyotes, grey wolves, mountain lions, and river otters. And nest locations will often vary a lot, and they try to give partial protection. And many other small predators will prey on the young of these guys, including snapping turtles, California gulls, horned owls, red foxes, minks, bobcats, and golden eagles. But when the eggs are threatened, the parents actually can be quite aggressive, and they've actually been able to kill predators equal their own weight. So they can kill like a small fox or something. So that's pretty interesting. And predation on the adults when they're not nesting is rare, that they may be possibly hunted by golden and bald eagles, so that's not very often seen. But yeah, the conservation status of this guy, they got a really cool conservation status, or story really. They're considered least concerned now, but they were basically, during the 19th and early 20th century, they were hunted heavily for game and meat, and even they were also usually sensitive to lead poisoning, things like that. But there was believed to be pretty much the early 20th century, they were nearly extirpated from the United States. And there was only a population fewer than 70 trumpeter swans living in the hot springs near Yellowstone. So it kind of became a little island for them, a little Eden. But there was an aerial survey in the 1950s that found several thousand trumpeters in the Cooper's River in Alaska. And this population provided some really critical genetic stock for the tri-state area, so tri-state or Montana, Idaho, Wyoming population there, and there were reintroductions across the historic range from this population and the other 70 populations, so that's really cool. So historical range, they used to breed all across North America, from northwestern Indiana, west of Oregon in the US, and they migrated as far south as Texas and Southern California. And they had other places such as Nebraska, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan were also places that they bred. And they actually found that prior to European arrival, and archaeological remains show that they actually found trumpeter swans as far east as Newfoundland. They dated back to 2,000 years ago. So it seems they potentially would have been just all over the place. And as I mentioned, these early efforts of reproduction kind of had modest success but they kind of had issues because the suitable habitats dwindled and the released birds did not really uptake migrations. Though most recently, the populations of all three major regions have kind of had substantial growth over the past 30 years. So it seems that they've showed 400% growth. So they're really showing that they're doing well, which is also really good. And Alberta, one of the largest conservation sites, they've been found in the near the Edmonton area within Big Lake, Also places like Michigan, Minnesota, Yellowstone was another good example of things like that. But yeah, but now, as you said, the population went from basically a few thousand to now 46,000. So they've really had a really good go of it and really doing well now. So yeah, this one was done by Narwhalla. Narwhalla really did a wonderful job with the swan. Big fan. So now we're going to move on to some mammals now. We're going to be moving on to some monkeys. We've got the Hamadryas baboon now, done by Leaf, NicholasLionRider, and Monsoon, who remade it, and it really looks wonderful now. We'll have a look at the male here. So the Hamadryas baboon is a species of old world monkey, or a baboon, which is native to the Horn of Africa in the southwestern region of the Arabian Peninsula. And this region provides habitats with few natural predators, and they actually do quite well up there. And they're often considered a sacred animal by ancient Egyptians, hence the other name sacred baboon. So these guys have quite striking sexual dimorphism, with males being nearly twice as large as the females, which is common in most baboons. But these guys also show quite a bit of difference in coloration. You can see the male here is almost like a silver to whitish or grayish, and got really large, almost like mane, stuff like that, with a reddish bum and that, but the females are much more just drab brown, and he's also quite big. So males have body measurements of about 80 centimeters or 31 inches, and they weigh between 20 to 30 kilograms or 44 to 66 pounds, with females being quite a bit smaller, weighing about 10 to 15 kilograms or 22 to 33 pounds, and have a body length of 40 to 45 centimeters or 16 to 18 inches, with a tail of about 40 to 60 centimeters long or 16 to 24 inches. With ends of that small tuft there, and you can see the little babies here are almost entirely black. That they lose that coloration after about a year old. And Hamadryas baboons reach sexual maturity about 4 years old for females, and about 5 to 7 for males. So males typically mature a little bit later. Have a look at the female here then. So as I mentioned, these guys kind of like that Horn of Africa. Their range extends from the Red Sea, from Ethiopia, Somalia, and Djibouti, I believe how you say that, and that kind of area. They live in arid areas such as like savannas, rocky areas where they like to live on cliffs where they find water and sleep there. And it's typical, like most baboons, they're omnivorous and have adapted to this dry habitat by eating pretty much whatever. During the wet season, they'll feed on blossoms, seeds, wild roots, leaves from acacia trees, and during the dry season they'll eat leaves, and they'll also be known to eat insects, other small invertebrates, reptiles, and small mammals, even reptiles and birds, small mammals, including young antelope. So that's pretty interesting. They also have a drinking activities also depend a lot on the breeding on the season. During the wet season, these guys do not have to go far to find pools, but during the dry season, they frequent up to 3 permanent water holes, with baboons typically rest near these water holes during the mid-afternoon, and then they kind of also dig during a short period of time for natural water holes. So these guys, like other types of baboons, they live in groups. They have an unusual, like, 4-level social system called the multi-level system, with most social interactions occurring within small groups, or called one-male units, or harems, which usually has 1 male and up to 10 females, and the male will kind of guard that area. And the harem also includes a younger follower male that may be related to the leader, and 2 or more harems unite repeatedly to form clans, and within these clans, the males can be close relatives of one another, and have an age-related dominance hierarchy. So the oldest would typically be the boss. And the bands at kind of that next level, 2 to 4 clans often band up to like 400 individuals and usually travel and sleep as a group. And then males will really leave these bands, and females have occasionally transferred or trained in between these bands of males. And bands may actually fight one another for territory and food. And the adult male leaders are usually the combatants. So typically all the males will fight, the females don't do anything. And bands can also contain solitary males that are not harem leaders or followers, and move freely within these bands. And several bands can form a troop, and they usually can be seen sleeping on cliffs. So let's have a look at the male while we're talking about him. Where is our male? There he is, wonderful big boy. Oh, no, that's not me. So these guys are actually quite usual among baboons and macaques, because the society is strictly patriarchal. So the male kind of dictates where everything goes. He'll tell them where they go, and he'll often herd them with like visual threats or stuff if they wander too far. So males sometimes will actually raid the harems for females. It can give aggressive fights and then try to take over. But in general, it's kind of a more male-led society, or groups, the males that take control. And Hamadryas baboons had traditionally been thought to have a female transfer society, with females being moved across their relatives of the same sex. However, it shows that they retain close associations with at least some females, and females can spend also as much time with their females what they do with harem males or harem males, and some females even interact with each other outside of the harems. It's also not uncommon from the females from the same natal group to end up in the same harem, and females still associate and help their extended families despite their interactions being controlled by the top male. So basically the male may dictate everything, but these females will obviously try their best to do their thing and keep in contact with each other, which is pretty cool. And these guys breed aseasonally, so the dominant male has a one male unit, does most of the mating. The other males will secretly try and get some of his females, but the females will do most of the parenting. As you can see, they'll nurse and groom the infant and all that, with dominant male baboons preventing the other males coming in contact with their infants, and they also protect the young from predators. The dominant male will tolerate the young and will carry around and play with them sometimes, but he's not that into it. And with the new male takes over a female, she develops sexual swellings that may be the adaptation to prevent new males from killing her offspring. And when the little babies here, they reach puberty, they show a playful interest in young infants, and they will even kidnap infants by luring them away from their harems and inviting them to ride their backs. But this is all most often done by follower males, and this kidnapping can lead to dehydration and starving of the infant. And the harem leader would retrieve the infants from the kidnappers, which is mostly an act to protect their offspring. So it's just kind of what happens sometimes. And yeah, really, really cool. So these guys are typically considered least concern, I believe, but transformation of pasture land to make, obviously, for agriculture is a big threat to these guys. And the only natural predators are striped hyena, spotted hyena, and the diminishing number of African leopards that can still be found. They are considered least concern, but there's no wide-ranging threat that exists to their population. But there may be risk of habitat loss due to agricultural expansion and irrigation projects, which is also quite good, but luckily they're the least concern. They're doing well. Really, really wonderful animal. Really like the model as well. Monsoon, he did a wonderful job. So next we got another monkey. We got this one done by just Monsoon. He did this all by himself. We have got the Haman langur, also known as just the Northern Grey Plains langur, or Northern Plains Grey langur, also known as the Bengal Sacred langur, or the Bengal Sacred langur and the Sacred langur. That's kind of the other names. And these guys belong to the genus Semapithecus, which is along with the other Indian langurs. They were typically all one species in this species, but they've been often split into many different species, like the Southern Plains Grey langur, things like that. But these guys, you can see their fur is mostly lightly colored, with this darker fur being around the back and limbs, and they have these dark faces and hands, but the babies are a little bit more brownish, as you can see there. So you can see these guys are grayish, and the babies a little bit more brownish. Yeah, fits about right. Let's see if we can find one over here that's not sitting in the grass. I love these wonderful monkeys. So the body size, typically excluding the tail, ranges from about 45 centimeters or 17 inches to 78 centimeters or 30 inches long, with a tail length between 80 and 111 centimeters, or between 31 and 44 inches. And typically, adult males will weigh between 16.9 to 19.5 kilograms, or basically 37 to 43 pounds, or females typically a little bit smaller, between 9.5 or 21 pounds and 16.1 kilograms, or 35 pounds. And these guys, in terms of distribution, they are the northern plains langur, so they're typically found in northern parts of India. They can be found south of the Himalayas and south of the Tapuri River and the Kanishna River, and they have been introduced in Western Bangladesh by Hindu pilgrims. So that's also interesting, but they typically just live in that northern part of India. These guys are diurnal, and they're both terrestrial and arboreal, so they typically hang out in the trees as well. They typically live in subtropical or tropical dry forests or scrubland, and the group females groom members of both sexes, but males do not groom each other, so because males can't touch each other. I was going to make a joke there, but I thought it'd be a bit risque. These guys live in several different types of groups. They can live in groups with multiple males and females, one male and multiple females, or multiple males and new females. All males can live alone without a group. So they're kind of whatever, really. It's just a mixed bag. Group sizes can be quite big, though, and single male groups are quite common, but groups can exceed 100 monkeys. And upon reaching maturity, the males will typically immigrate from their natal group, or the group that they were born in, and the females will typically remain. And young adult females are typically dominant than older females, and when a new male takes over a group, he may engage in infanticide of young fathered by the previous male or males, but this is less common where the takeover occurs over several months. So the northern Great Plains langur typically feeds on fruits and leaves, and is able to survive on mature leaves, which is key to its ability to survive through the dry season. They'll also eat seeds, flowers, buds, barks, and insects, including caterpillars. And there's also fed fruits and vegetables by humans, and some groups get a substantial portion of their food by raiding temples and raiding crops as well. So that's also a bit dangerous. You shouldn't be feeding the monkeys. It's not good. Groups that have abundant access to food year-round, by like temples or raid crops, also breed throughout the year. But other groups that live in the forest, where food's a little bit more harder to come by, typically give birth between December and May, with a gestation period of about 200 days. Well, we'll talk about the baby. We'll talk about the baby while we're looking at him. Look at this cute little guy. Females, other than the mother, often alloparent, or they will also take care of the offspring for the first month or so of its life. So it's typically shared around the group, which is really, really cool. These guys kind of do everything communally. They'll take care of each other's babies. And weaning often occurs at about 1 year or so old, and the males will reach maturity at about 6 to 7 years old. Females probably a little bit less than that. These guys also often associate with the chital deer, and both species will respond to each other's alarm calls. And the chital, it's a kind of a beneficial relationship. So both species will respond to alarm calls, with the chital having the benefit of the vigilance of the male langurs, watching out for predators in the trees, while the langurs benefit from the better sense of smell and hearing that the deer has. And they've often engaged in grooming sessions with rhesus macaques, so they get on well with other species as well. And these guys are typically considered least concerned by the OCN, so they're doing well, but they are threatened by habitat loss, and they have adapted to many habitats, and the Hindu religion considers them to be sacred, hence its large population within India, including towns and cities, and is subject to some threats, including roadkill, dog attacks, forest fires, and disease that can be caught from humans and domestic animals. And they are sometimes hunted for food, especially in the state of Odisha and rather Pandesh, I believe. And they're sometimes killed by humans to prevent it from raiding crops. And also, these guys, captive grey langurs, are used in Delhi to scare off rhesus macaques, which steals food and attack people. So, little fact about them. But look at this wonderful monkey, really, really nice. Nice to see some kind of underrated old world monkeys getting in the game. Big fan. So that one was also done by Monsoon. Our next one's done by Seth. We've got some ungulates in the house. We have got the Cape bushbuck. So let's have a look at the male here. So wonderful guy here. So this guy's also coming back. These guys are a common and widespread antelope that are typically found across sub-Saharan Africa, where they live in a wide variety of habitats such as rainforests, mountain forests, forest savanna mosaics, bushveld, woodlands, all those things like that. And in terms of their size, they're typically about 90 centimeters tall at the shoulder and weigh between 45 and 80 kilograms, or 99 to 176 pounds. And they're typically solitary, and they're terrestrial browsers. So there have been like some interesting taxonomy of these guys. They've been fractured into over 40 different subspecies, and they've found that these guys really don't need that many subspecies. They've kind of all just been lumped into one. Though there have been some really interesting research into declines and different regional differences between these guys. So it kind of led them to be different subspecies in the first place. But now they're basically considered all the same species. And as I mentioned, they stand about 90 centimeters and 75, 80 kilograms. It depends on sex as well. You can see they have this light coat, brown coat with up to 7 white stripes and white splotches across it. These white patches are usually geometrically shaped, and most mobile parts of the body have these shapes. And the muzzle is also quite wide, and these horns, only found in males, as they can reach over half to a meter long with only one twist, as you can see there. And at 10 months old, these young males will sprout these horns, and they'll be particularly twisted until they maturity, form the first loop. So in the Cape bushbuck, in some cases, the Cape bushbuck has less striping and is more uniformly coloured than populations in West Africa. So this is in the Cape of South Africa and Zambia and stuff like that, which is another interesting thing because you can see the difference between different populations often don't have stripes and things like that, which is very interesting. Could be just genetic variation and all that. Look at this wonderful mother and a baby there. So we'll talk about these guys still. So in terms of their ecology, these guys will mainly browse, so they eat all sorts of plant matter that they can reach, and they're active throughout the day, but tend to be nocturnal near human habitations, obviously for protection. And they tend to be solitary, but sometimes live in pairs. And they will often sometimes live in a home area, which is usually about 500,000 square meters on the savanna, and it typically can be even much larger in the forest that they will not normally leave. And these areas usually overlap other bushbuck home areas, as they're basically solitary, and mature males will go out of their way to stay away from each other. So obviously big boys, you don't want to mess up. And look at this cute little baby bushbuck. How cute is this little man? And some game farmers actually discovered that bushbuck may be excluded by their larger relative, the Nyala, and when they try to introduce them at the same time. So these two species can be found in close proximity in natural communities, but when you try and introduce them, often the Nyala can outcompete the bushbuck. So that's also very interesting. Really, really wonderful guys here. I'm a big fan of these wonderful bushbucks. Done by Seth. That's really nice. This guy got another pass. A nice remake. So next we're moving on to one by Leaf and Jen, another remake. We have got the Rocky Mountain Elk. So another really cool guy up here. So we'll have a look at this wonderful male up here. So these guys are considered a subspecies, though I would say that very loosely, since all the populations of American elk only came during the end of the Ice Age, about 15,000 years ago or so. That can be found in the Rocky Mountains and adjacent areas in Western North America. So this population of elk typically live in more open forests and floodplains and lower elevations, but in the summer, they'll migrate up to alpine basins and subalpine basins and places like that, where they typically like to live. And they've also been found in diverse habitats, but often found in forests and forested habitats. And they often stay in higher elevations during the winter months and migrate down lower in the warmer months, and then they migrate lower in the winter. And they may even come down the mountains and leave the forest for some grasslands for part of the day, then head back in the evening back to the timber. So it's really just whatever the herd wants to do. And actually, climate change has actually been affecting these guys. Climate change has been keeping the elk in higher elevation habitats for longer than normal. And climate change has, as it warms up, in some cases even increased the seasonal range of elk in winter. So even in the Yellowstone, the climate warming has allowed to keep snow at the lower levels of in the past that have given elk the ability to kind of populate higher ranges than before. And the lack of snow in Yellowstone also given the elk an advantage over the wolves, as the wolves rely on deep snow to hunt these elk during the winter. And the total wild population is about 1 million individuals. So they're doing quite well. They are secure. So in terms of conservation, they've been introduced and reintroduced into lots of areas across, especially as the population declined in like 1913. But now their populations, with really good conservation work, they've really driven their populations up. And there's been introductions in kind of Washington and eastern US just generally. And some populations Canada as well, in the British Columbia's Yoho National Parks, places like that. But another issue that's been finding them is that in 2010, there was a Rocky Mountain elk that was diagnosed with chronic wasting disease, which affects the brain tissue of the elk that is infected, and is similar to bovine spongiform epilepsopathy, which is also known as mad cow disease, or MCD. And there's no evidence that this elk chronic wasting disease is transmissible to humans. And research considering it and how it affects the ecosystem needs to continue. And they're actually worried about this environmental and chronic wasting disease problems in Colorado, and even a greater scale throughout the US and North America has led to people trying to make some solutions for it. But yeah, not too different from these are subspecies, so it's really just the population there. Wonderful male, and I love the antlers. It really came out wonderfully. And then you can see these cute little babies here. How adorable. Really nice that this guy got a remake, because this is like one of the first mods. Really, really awesome that we got a nice Rocky Mountain Elk going. So big fan. So next, our second to last animal. This one was done by Leaf and Jen. Our next one was done by Narwhal again. So who doesn't love Narwhal? Making some wonderful mods. You've got the Bahalal, the Barial, I believe that's you say that, or just called the blue sheep. So these guys are a caprine or a goat native to the high Himalayas and occur in India, Bhutan, China, Nepal, Myanmar, and Pakistan. And the Hallowed Mountains and Egyptia has the highest concentration of these guys with about 15 barrels per square kilometer, or about 30,000 in total. So they're considered quite common. They're considered least concern as well. And they're a medium-sized caprid. They get between 115 to 165 centimeters long along the head-to-body length, with a tail of about 10 to 20 centimeters. Well, that's 45 to 65 inches and 3.9 to 7.9 inches. They also stand about 69 to 91 or 27 to 36 inches high at the shoulder, and body mass can range between 35 and 75 kilograms or 77 to 165 pounds, with males being in general slightly larger than the females. And the dense coats, as you can see, they kind of grayish and almost look blue, where they get the name kind of blue sheep. And they also have this really interesting white belly and kind of like charcoal shape going around there. They also are, ears have small, and they have these really interesting horns. The horns of both sexes are ridged up on the surface, and in the males they grow upwards, then turn sideways, then grow backwards. And sometimes almost look like an upside-down moustache, which is pretty interesting. And they may grow up to lengths of about 80 centimeters, or 31 inches, with females growing much smaller horns at about 20 centimeters or 7.9 inches, as you can see here. This is our male, and the female here. Isn't she a wonderful cutie? And there's been some interesting look at their taxonomy and evolution, and there was actually a subspecies described called the dwarf blue sheep, which was originally its own species, but it seems like these guys got quite a bit smaller. They got about 35 kilograms, which is half as much as your average male burrell, with lech-sex dimorphism in females of the two species being very similar. But it seems there was only about 200 individuals of this population identified in the year 2000, which classed them as endangered. But it seems these guys genetically are just a variant or just a local population of your typical blue sheep. So they're trying to conserve them, but in general, they don't really impact the species that much, just because they're a weird little subpopulation that's smaller. And in terms of their breeding and ecology, these guys are active throughout the day. They often feed and rest on these grassy mountain slopes, and due to their excellent camouflage, they're able to, and the absence of cover in their environment, they remain motionless when approached. And once they are noticed, they'll often scamper up the cliffs, where they once again freeze, and then they use their camouflage to kind of blend into the rocky faces of the rock face. And population densities are typically about 0.9 to 2.7 animals per kilometer. Increases to a maximum of 10 animals in the winter when the herds congregate into the valleys. And Baral are mainly grazers, but they will feed on when there's not much grass. They'll eat much more browse, so they eat herbs and shrubs. And a high degree of their diet overlaps with animals such as donkeys and livestock. And together with the density-dependent foliage limitations, there often is competition between the livestock and the Baharal, which is often detrimental for your native animals because they often decline very steeply in these areas. And where they overlap, they're also the favorite prey of animals such as snow leopards, Himalayan wolves, and leopards, with a few lambs being fallen prey by foxes or eagles sometimes, as we talk about these guys here. So we'll have a look at the male again, talk about rutting. And of course that happens. So this is our wonderful male here. So the rutting of the Baharal starts around the late November, continues up to about mid-January. And during the rut, they'll use multiple strategies for mating. Namely, they'll tend, block, and coursing to try and fight each other, with the lambs being born in late June and July. Not June and July. Can't speak today, but look at these wonderful, cute little guys here. Really cute little kid. In terms of their threats, as I mentioned, they are least concern, but they face threats such as poaching for meat and competition with livestock. Poaching, however, is uncommon because these guys live in very unsuitable areas, so they're very hard to get to for poaching. And similarly, livestock do not generally frequent these mountain areas, even where they do coexist, so it's often quite safe for them guys, because these guys often live in the parts where most of the other animals don't want to go anywhere near them. And their relationship with humans. Actually, many Buddhist monasteries protect the Baharal found around them, but lately issues about crop damage and caused by these guys are starting to arise in areas such as the Spiti Valley. So yeah, really, really cool. Cool to have such like a underrated caprine in the game. Really wonderful with how it came out. And now, this was done by Narwhal, and now, but most definitely not least, we have got the African Forest Buffalo done by Jen and Genora Pizza. Look at this wonderful guy. Look at this big male. Oh, I love how this guy came out. It really came out wonderfully. So this is, as I mentioned, is often considered the African Forest Buffalo, which is a subspecies of the Cape Buffalo, or sometimes considered a species. They're also known as the Congo Buffalo or the Dwarf Buffalo. They are the smallest subspecies, and they're the only subspecies that occurs in rainforests, and typically around Central and Western Africa, and often being suggested as a distinct species, but as taxonomy being taxonomy. So look at this wonderful guy here. He's going for a big run. Probably going for food. Look at this big guy. Oh, he's so cool. These guys, as mentioned, the smaller subspecies. These guys will typically... Cape Buffalo typically weigh between 475 and 870 kilograms, or 937 to 1,918 pounds, while the African Forest Buffalo are typically much lighter. They get between 250 and 320 kilograms, or 550 to 705 pounds, with weight often not being the most distinct difference. You can see there they're quite a lot more reddish than your Cape Buffalo, with a much more reddish hide. And also the shape and size of the horns are very different. So these guys have much smaller horns than the Savannah Cape Buffalo counterparts. And they often grow and fuse together in Cape Buffaloes, but in Forest Buffaloes it doesn't really happen that often. As you can see, it's kind of more connected like that, yeah. In terms of their ecology, as I mentioned, they live in rainforests in West and Central Africa. However, their home ranges typically consist of marshes, grassy savannas, and the wet African rainforests. And savannas are where these guys graze, while these guys will go to wallows to help with insects and wallow and all that. And they actually spend most of their day in clearings, grazing in grasses and sedges, and they're not very often observed in unbroken canopies. And consequently, their diet is mainly made up of grasses, and often they will grow in these clearings and stuff like that. So look at these wonderful big guys here. Oh, the wonderful females. So this mixture of habitat is actually really important for these buffaloes, and expansion and encroachment of the rainforests and the surrounding savanna is major differences in maintaining these ecosystems. So often African forest buffalo enjoy these old logging tracks and roads where the forest gets thinner and grass often grows. And in these areas, they'll often depend on the grass that is able to develop as a result, and the area has been previously pre-cut. And in some areas, park management burn off the savanna on a regular basis to keep the rainforest from growing onto the savannas and changing the ecosystem of the area. So it has to be kind of maintained. Large home ranges can also be associated with less productive habitats. However, a larger area of open grass has been associated to have positive results with herd size. So basically, the less closed the habitat is, the larger these herds will be. And the only documentation of the actual home range boundaries have been relatively recent. So over time, it'll tell us how these boundaries kind of change over time. However, this shows almost no movement in range boundaries from one year to the next, though these home ranges typically stay quite consistent. And over the areas that include these home ranges, they stay consistent. But the preferences in regards of what parts of the range used usually differs in the season. So in March, from March to April, these guys will spend most of their time in the forests, and during September to February, they will favor these marshes and savannas. And similar to African forest buffaloes, they arrange themselves in herds, and that helps defend from predators. However, they are typically not immune from assault. They'll be preyed on by African leopards, which typically are only a threat to young buffaloes, and only feed on them when they have an opportunity. And the Nile crocodile is the only potential predator of adult buffalo. but typically they're not really predated on that much because there's not really many lions and hyenas in the rainforest, so they're typically pretty good there. And in terms of social behavior, these guys are typically found in much more smaller herds than compared to Cape Buffalo. With Cape Buffalo, they often will live in herds of up to thousands of members. Well, let's have a look at the babies we'll talk about. Members up to 1,000. Well, these guys will often stay in much smaller groups, as small as 3, and even if a really huge group of these guys will typically be over 30. And if African buffalo live in these large groups, they typically spend more time grazing, since they have less time, less need to devote to looking out for predators. And a herd of African forest buffalo typically consists of 1 or occasionally 2 bulls and a harem of adult females, juveniles, and their calves. And unlike Cape buffaloes, African forest buffalo bulls will remain with the herd continuously year-round. And on the other hand, Cape buffaloes will stay in bachelor herds until the wet season, where these young bulls will join the females, mate, and help protect the young calves, and then leave. And the animals will typically remain in the same herd for their entire lives, and herd switching in cows has been observed, however this is not common, and herds can split up to 2 groups for a short period of time before joining back up again. And these guys are typically unaffected by seasonal changes. However, in the wet season, these guys will spend more time in the forests, and the adults tend to use resting places based on sand during the wet season, but use dirt and leaves during the wet season. Dry season, I mean. Dirt and leaves during the dry season, sand during the wet season. And moreover, also, in open habitats such as clearings, the herds are typically more agitated while resting and are more rounded in shape than herds in the forest habitat in the wet seasons where they live in the forests. So it's very interesting. And just look how beautiful these guys look. I'm a really big fan of how Jen has done this. I have to say, it's definitely one of the best mods. I just love how they got everything right about it. Really shows that cool look that they have with the long hair going down their ears and the kind of the reddish look to them. Really interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if they were described as different species quite soon, just because they are so distinct, and I really love them. Really, really wonderful. So Jen and Genora Pizza, you did a wonderful job. Really came out wonderfully. So I think this will be the perfect place to end the video now. So yeah, I really, really, really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified if I upload anything. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.